Gold Striker at California's Great America is one of the most highly regarded coasters built by GCI. In my opinion, however, it is one of the most overrated roller coasters I have ever ridden. I first rode Gold Striker 2 times in 2019, and at that point, the ride jackhammered me so much that it stapled me, and it was super uncomfortable. It was not a great ride experience, and I really walked away super disappointed. And at the time, it was one of the most overrated rides I had ever ridden. Since those rides, I had been to Dollywood and been on Thunderhead, and I had also visited Valley Fair and ridden Renegade, and I love Renegade and Thunderhead, so I figured when I got back up to Gold Striker, I would like it a lot more than I did back in 2019. So now that I've gotten a fair amount of re-rides, I got 10 rides on this past trip to Great America, and I still think this ride is pretty overrated. I have a much higher opinion of this ride than I did in 2019, but it's still nowhere near as good as everyone says it is. All that being said though, I still really enjoyed this coaster. It's an awesome ride. I even bought a nano coaster and a t-shirt of it. So I really like it. It's just not as good as everyone says it is. This ride is like the first thing that you see when you walk into Great America, which is kind of bizarre because obviously Gold Striker is themed to like the Old West and you see like a pioneer in the logo for the ride. But it's like it's literally right off the main entrance, and the main entrance has this grand American presentation. Go figure, it's California's Great America. It's kind of weird to have a ride themed to the Old West just like right on the doorstep of Carousel Columbia, you know? And when I first visited CGA in 2019, I was kind of like surprised to see, oh wow, it's like right there, you know? Because I had seen so many videos of Gold Striker and of the carousel, but I don't know, I just didn't realize that they were literally right next to each other. Another thing about this roller coaster is it's a lot of banked turns, and a lot of those banked turns kind of create like a barrier. So this ride basically barricades itself from most of the park, so it's really hard to get views of this attraction, which is kind of a bummer. But I love how the first drop wraps around the Star Tower, so that's really cool. It reminds me of how California Screamin' used to wrap around the Maliboomer, so that makes me nostalgic. So Gold Striker has GCI's Millennium Flyer trains. These trains are awesome. They're kind of the old gen restraints though, so they have padded cushions unlike Ghost Rider and Mystic Timbers. So they're super comfortable to sit in, but the restraints themselves are identical. You can really get some airtime room if you hold them up, which is perfect. So let's dig into this ride experience. You're gonna roll out of the station and you're gonna hit a very, very sharp turnaround. If you're in the back of the train, you're actually going to get some surprisingly strong laterals because the turn is just so sharp. It's very sudden, and on my first ride this year, it kind of blew me away because I did not remember that. It picks up a good amount of speed in that really sharp turn, so that's really cool. After that, you coast up the lift hill. It's not too tall, but you have a nice view of the Star Tower and the 49ers Stadium. When you reach the top, the first drop is actually in a tunnel, which is pretty cool. This drop is actually far better than I remember. In the back row, you actually get some floater airtime, which kind of blew me away because it's a curved drop. And from my experience with curved drops, you usually get nothing. Like on Mystic Timbers, you get nothing in the back row. But Gold Striker's drop actually floats you out of the seat, which is super nice. It's not like very sustained, but you know, something is better than nothing, which is better than most GCI drops. Like Thunderhead, Renegade, I remember no airtime on those rides. And even Ghost Rider with the straight drop has nothing. So getting some floater was a great surprise. In the front row, you don't really get that, but you do have the nice visuals of all the wood and no one in front of you, which is super cool. It's also really loud in there because everyone will scream and the tunnel reflects the noise back at you. So it gets super loud in there. If you're in the back row, you're going to land pretty sharply and then get thrown to the right as the train races through this turn. It is a little shaky. In 2019, this is where I got jackhammered really hard and it like stapled me. But this year, it wasn't terrible. It felt like it had like a little bit of a bite, but it wasn't awful. After that, you race past the queue line and then you hop into a bunny hill, which is an awesome airtime moment. It's one of the best on the ride, especially if you're in the back row. That's definitely a highlight of the ride if you're in the back. In the front, you get some awesome airtime too. And then you curve up into the first turnaround. This GCI loves doing this where you like pop up and then turn right. These are like my favorite moments on Thunderhead, so Gold Striker also does it really well. So in the front row, you get some crazy airtime just for a split second, and then you're shoved to the left as the track turns right, which is super cool. It's an awesome variety of forces. Like, I tried it in the left seat and the right seat in the front row, and at one point I thought it was better in the right seat, but after a few re-rides I decided that they're basically the same thing. So it's pretty cool. It's an awesome feeling getting thrown up and then thrown to the side like immediately. But that only happens in the front row. In the back, you don't get anything, which is a major bummer. So after you race through that turn, there's technically, it looks like it would give airtime in the back row, but I got maybe a light floater pop, but it was nowhere near. It was nowhere near as good as the pop in the front row cresting into this element. After that is like another banked speed hill. This will be another great airtime moment in both the front and the back. So it's an awesome pop. It's not as powerful as cresting into the turnaround though. This next turn is pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, you don't really get any airtime coming in or out of it, so that's kind of a bummer. And after that, you drop into the worst part of the ride, in my opinion. In 2023, this section of track right here was running super rough. Definitely the roughest part of the ride, in my opinion. You basically go through a twisted bunny hill and then into an actual bunny hill, and then you crest up into another turnaround. When you're cresting up into that third turn, the roughness kind of goes away, but the twisted hill is brutal. It's like the worst part of the ride, in my opinion. And you don't really get any airtime in any row, so it just kind of feels like, bruh. It's the worst part of the ride, in my opinion. And then the floater hill, you actually get some nice air, especially in the front row. I would say less so in the back, but it's still there. And then the turnaround is basically the same thing as the first turnaround on this ride. You get an awesome pop in the front row and nothing in the back, and then you curve all the way down. This is also where you'll probably get the best view of the ride from the midways. You can really see this turn, which is cool. After that, you basically hit a straight section before dipping down and then cresting up into like a double up, but it's like profiled to be really small. You might get a light pop in the front row, especially during the second pop when you actually turn again, but you get nothing in the back. And it's also kind of rough, so definitely not the highlight of the ride. I think it could have been better if it was just one straight pop, like how the other two turnarounds were profiled. After that, you go through another twisted section and then you pop up into a left-hand turn. In the front row, this is another floater moment, and in the back you get nothing, and then you slam into the brake run. So yeah, that's Gold Striker, and this layout, in my opinion, is super overrated. I got my first ride on this year's trip was in row the third to back. I walked away thinking there was like no airtime, like literally, except for the speed hill after the drop. Maybe one of the other speed hills hit. In the back row, this ride really only has like one or two really strong airtime moments, those being the speed hills, and then like a couple of floater pops, and that's about it. Thunderhead in the back row and Renegade in the back were far better than Gold Striker, in my opinion. Really, I think this layout caters to the front row. There's basically 7 airtime moments. Some of them are a lot stronger than others, but 7 compared to like 2 or 3, that's a world of difference, and it's such a better ride experience in the front row. I think I got 4 rides in the front. 4 out of the 10 were in the front, maybe 5, I can't remember, but I got a fair share of rides in the front row, and that was by far the best seat on this ride, in my opinion. So if you're in the front row, then it's probably an elite GCI, but literally any other row, it really falls short, in my opinion. I kind of feel like I have to look at that, especially when you compare it to Thunderhead, which I also had a good feel for that ride. In the back row, that ride kicks, and it kicks in the front too, so I actually preferred Thunderhead in the front row. The back row is just such a better ride experience than Gold Striker in the back row that Thunderhead is way better. Like, I would probably even take front row on Thunderhead over front row on Gold Striker. I would definitely take Renegade over Gold Striker too, and Mystic Timbers, obviously, if you watch my video on that. I think Ghost Rider kicks this thing. This is nowhere near as good as everyone says it is, from my experience at least. And I feel like with Great America closing, this thing's only going to get rougher and rougher before it bites the dust. So I don't think I'm going to miss this ride as much as everyone else will, which I guess is a positive, but at the same time, I wish I loved I love this thing. It's like nowhere near the top of my list. I think the only GCIs that are worse than Gold Striker are Invader. That might be it. I don't know, because I think I'd take Prowler over Gold Striker too, because Prowler is basically junior Mystic Timbers, and I love Mystic Timbers. But I don't want to hate on this ride too much because, as I said, it's still good. It's a really fun ride, especially if you're in the front row. If you're in the front row, it's a great ride, but it's just super overrated. I don't understand the people who say this is better than Ghost Rider. I don't understand the people who say this is better than Railblazer. It's like a mid-tier GCI in my opinion, but it's still an awesome ride. I love GCIs, especially the more GCIs that I've ridden, the more I've like actually appreciated them. And I do like Gold Striker a lot more than I did back in 2019. But at the same time, this is a strong number 2 at this park. Railblazer is by far number 1. And I did consider putting Flight Deck ahead of it, but I really prefer rides that focus on airtime. So Gold Striker Gold Striker kind of wins just on that, which is kind of unfair for Flight Deck, but because I walked away far more impressed with Flight Deck than I did with Gold Striker, but I still have to rank Gold Striker ahead of Flight Deck because it caters to my interests. So just based on that principle, it's an awesome ride, especially in the front. I love this thing in the front. That's only one row. Everything else, especially towards the back. The first ride that I got this year in the third to back, I was I was like shocked at how forceless this thing is. It had like no airtime outside of the 2-speed hills. It was just so disappointing. I feel very fortunate that I was able to spend 3 days at Great America and get a bunch of laps in the front row, because otherwise I would probably be maintaining my 2019 opinion and saying this is by far the worst or the most overrated ride ever. I don't think it's the most overrated ride I've ever ridden, but it might be the most overrated roller coaster I've ever ridden. It's up there, definitely, in my opinion. But I still like this thing, don't get me wrong. It's a really fun ride. It's just not as great as everyone seems to say that it is. I know people rave about the intensity on this thing, but I didn't really feel that. I don't know. From my rides on Thunderhead this year, I thought Thunderhead was running far more intense, and same with Renegade. Didn't really stand out to me, the intensity. It just kind of felt like generic GCI intensity, which that's kind of insulting to say because GCIs are pretty intense, and Gold Striker does have that, but I would not say that this is the most intense GCI. But it's still a really good ride from one of my favorite manufacturers. If you've ridden Gold Striker, please let me know what you think about it. Do you agree with me? Am I totally wrong? Do you think I just got a bunch of bad rides on this thing? Please let me know your experiences down below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you later.